Hi guys, my name's Amber Horton and I'm going to be talking to you guys for the last time about my project Learning About Literature. Just to start, we're going to look at what the problem is that this project is addressing. So basically, in today's world, there are a lot of different ways to read and not a lot of people that really understand those ways and those differences. So this project kind of targeted younger students and wanted to inspire them to read, educate them about reading in print, about reading on a digital screen, whether it be a computer, a Nook, a Kindle, a tablet, iPad, phone, anything. Because there are a lot of differences when it comes to those things, and it's important to understand those differences so that younger students, especially, understand the best ways for them to read. I think that for people that have grown up reading mostly in print and now with the new digital technologies, it can be confusing as well. But these younger students are immediately thrown into this world where they don't really know what would be the best for them. They don't really know a lot about the history of these things. And so that is kind of the problem that I'm attempting to address here. My target audience is students from the ages of 6 to 12. So it's a pretty large range, but I think that it's important from when they first start reading at around the age of 6 to around 12, they're kind of on their own. They can be reading their own books. They don't really need a lot of influence when it comes to that, but I do think that it's important for them to still recognize and understand the best ways for them to read. So when it comes to the project that I've actually created, it's changed a lot from beginning to end, but it is a clickable interactive narrative. It covers three main topics for the students to look through: the history of both print and digital, the current state of both of these industries, benefits for reading in print, benefits for reading on a Kindle, recommendations, and these recommendations are tailored to the age groups. So not every 6-year-old is going to want to be reading the same thing as a 12-year-old. So that's really important to make sure that they understand for their age group what the right recommendations are. And then an interactive quiz where they can kind of click through. And the main purpose of the quiz is to help them understand, especially for students that don't think they like to read, that there's a book out there for everyone and that reading can really be an adventure. So before I actually started designing the project, I did a lot of research, and I originally was looking at interactive, multimedia type news stories. And so I looked at these stories because I knew I wanted everything to be self-contained in my project. I didn't want there to be multiple entry points. I didn't want them to have to hunt around to try to find the project, to try to find information about the project, because I think that for the age group, everything kind of needs to be in the same place. That way they can properly utilize all the resources that I'm giving them. So some of the things that I found were common themes throughout my research were narrow focus, visually consistent, and tailored to audience. So when it comes to a narrow focus, a lot of the things that I looked at had really specific subjects that they branched out from and they kind of told everything about. So, for example, one thing that I looked at was Brooklyn Took It, and it was all about Brooklyn and the Brooklyn Nets and how those things kind of come together and are symbiotic, I guess. And so I wanted to look at things like this that had a really specific subject and see how they address that and how they made it interesting. As far as visually consistent goes, I looked at, well, a lot of the things that I looked at were extremely visually consistent. This one by the Rolling Stone, Greenland Melting, was important because all of the design elements looked similar, everything kind of came together with a common theme, and it drew you in. So this is just the opening header for that project, and clearly, I mean, to me, that draws me in. So I knew I wanted to have a design that was consistent and it was different. I wanted my project to have a distinct design, something that people wouldn't be confused with anything else. And then for the last thing, tailored to audience. It's really important, especially when you have a specific age group audience, that the site looks how it should, is made for them, not just made for everybody. And so one thing that I struggled with in the beginning was picking an audience. And so once I finally did, it became a lot easier for me to create the design, to create the entire project. So one thing that I looked for were websites that were extremely tailored to the audience. This one was on Pitchfork. It was called Machines for Life, about Daft Punk. So this audience was clearly music lovers, people that love Daft Punk, people that are interested in enigmatic characters like Daft Punk. Some more research that I did later on would be about children's books, about what children like to read, and things of that nature. So that kind of came a little bit later and didn't really have as much to do with design, but a lot to do with the content that ended up actually being in the project. So now we're going to look at my design alternatives. I had 3 paper prototypes. This one and the last one were a little bit more conceptual, a little bit more maybe over the person's head, and had a lot of different features that maybe weren't necessary. So here's the first one. The second one ends up looking the most like my actual project, and then the last one is very similar to the first one, and just kind of the original idea was to tell the story through the book's perspective, which I think would have been a little bit too conceptual for a 6-year-old to understand. And so we kind of changed as we went and as the design process happened. So speaking of that, let's just take a look at my first prototype, my first digital prototype. Okay, so this is the home page. When you click on chapter 1, this is where it will take you. It's very simple. The design is extremely simple. Everything is simple. Yeah, it's just you learn about chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and that's it. There's no more exciting interactive elements. It's just very simplistic design, and the content is there, but it's just a little bit different. So then I did some testing after I made this, obviously, and I found a lot of interesting things that really changed the entire direction of the project. So when we look at the testing, I wanted to focus and make sure that users understood the general design of the project, that they could navigate through the design and actually get something out of it. So I tested on female students ages 11 to 12, a little bit on the higher end of my target audience. So I asked questions. These are just some samples, questions based on navigation and design concepts, because that's what I really wanted to get at with this first testing. Because if I was going to change the design, which I definitely did, I needed to know that right away, and also to make sure that the audience could actually work through the entire project. So I asked them questions like, I understood how to move from chapter to chapter, and then I left an open-ended question. What's one design element that you would like to see? So these are kids. I mean, they're young girls, and so they thought the design was a little bit too simplistic. I have to agree with them. They wanted brighter colors. They wanted more interactivity, as you can see here, and they also didn't really feel inspired by the site. I think that looking at that site, I don't really feel inspired either, so I understand as well. So what I had to think about was what could change and what could address these issues in the best possible way. And so I think that the interactivity and the lack of inspiration were kind of related. And so some changes that I made were total design overhaul, which you'll see in a second, and then the additions of interactive materials like recommendations and the quiz that I was talking about earlier. So basically, what we have here is a totally different design. And a lot of other things are different, as we'll see as we go through. So when you open this up, this looks way different. To me, it looks like an entirely different project than before. So if we look, chapter 1, and here we are, this part is the same, but you move through to chapter 2, you go to chapter 3, and then we have something totally new here. So it says, wondering what to read, and then we can say, yeah, totally, or no way, I am not interested in what to read. So if we click this, this will take us right to the quiz. So let's figure out why you don't want to read, I guess. And so this to me was important for an interactive element, and also for them to kind of gain a better understanding of themselves, and to understand maybe why that they would or wouldn't want to read. So let's say, have you ever read a book that you liked? No. Do you have to read books for school? I always see this as a common problem. If you read books for school and you don't like them because you're being forced to read books for school, clearly you don't like to read. So we'll say yes. Have you ever liked a book you read in school? No. Do you like going on adventures? Most kids do, so this tries to be a no-brainer question. This question is just kind of reminding the student, the user, that books can be taken anywhere and there's always an adventure waiting for you, I guess. And so if we say yes, then we go to find our own adventure. So we say, yay. This screen is what it would take you if on the last one before we went to the quiz you said yes. And so this button takes you back to the quiz just to make sure everybody has equal opportunity to see the quiz no matter what option you take. And then we hit yes because we're ready. This is where the recommendations and the age groups come in. So I didn't want to make a broad sweeping generalization. People over the age of 12 can read The Hunger Games. I don't think a 6-year-old can, but but that book is a good book. So I wanted to make sure that the recommendations were tailored for each age group. So if we say I'm ages 6 to 8, now when we get here, we get to make another decision. What kind of book am I looking for right now? Do I want to read a book about friendship? Here I have 2 options. Do I want to laugh? 2 options. So there's always options when it comes to these things. So it kind of gives readers not just like one insight, if you're 6 years old, you should read this book. And if you're a 6-year-old girl, you should read this book. So I didn't want to make any assumptions, and I wanted to give them enough options that they felt comfortable choosing from this list, picking their own books, understanding what types of books were important for them to read. Just really quick, I want to look at the About page again, just so we can see the text size and context. So we can see the text size because that comes into play in just a second. So if we look at the testing for what we've done in this next prototype, once again, I wanted to look at the ability of the audience to navigate, and then I also wanted to make sure that the main goal is being met. If this main goal isn't being met, then the project itself is a failure and there needs to be some major overhaul. So I asked, based on the knowledge gained in design concepts. So asking questions like, I have a good idea about recommended books for my age group. I was distracted by the bright colors in the background. While I made the design with kids in mind, with bright colors in mind, I wanted to make sure that it didn't take away from the general message and it wasn't distracting. Luckily, it was not. So what I found, my 2 main findings in this was that I offered a blank question as well for what they would like to see more of, any suggestions that they might have. And a lot of the responses were about they liked the recommendations, but there weren't enough provided. A lot of like boy answers were that there wasn't enough boy books. I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to make a gendered assumption about books. So I just thought that to change this, we could just add more recommendations total. And then the second thing was that the text was difficult to read on the help and about pages, which I just showed you. I think that this stems from the help and about pages, the text being a lot smaller than other pages in the project. So like I said, we just increased the font size, add more recommendations. Most of the changes were done in the creation of the second prototype. In this last prototype, the final project, it was more just tailoring to what exactly the audience wanted and making sure that everything was perfect. So if we take our last look at our completed project, this looks pretty much the same. Let's just jump right into the About page. This is a lot bigger, so they should be able to read this. Contact, a lot bigger. So I think that hopefully that will help address that problem. Now if we go to the recommendations part, just really quick, I'm ages 6 to 8. We have at least 3 in every single category. If we look at ages like over the age of 12, so we have a lot more options. I think that in this one there's 3 or 4 for each. So here they have 12 options of books. So I think that was important that if you have a child that doesn't normally read, now they have 12 options. They know what to look for. They know what to get. And so I think that is pretty helpful. So if we look at our final testing, here is what I asked them, so just so we can go over it. I wanted to know if they understood the main point of the website. Was this website useful? Is my goal being met, that people get on here and they understand what to do, and what it's for? So I wanted to just ask that very broad, and a lot of people really understood that, and so that was really, really good. I once again asked my favorite move from chapter to chapter, text easy to read, feeling more inspired, having a good idea of recommended books. And then one other thing, during this final testing, I tested some users that were outside of the target age range, which I was a little bit concerned about at first, but I decided there are going to be some older people looking at this, especially no 6-year-old is just going to find this and get on it by themselves. So it's important for older people to be able to use it, to be able to understand what it's for, and for it to be have a practical use. So I wanted to make sure, I know someone that would have a practical use for the site. I know someone that has a kid. I know someone that is still in school, something like that, that they could benefit from the site. And that kind of helped me gauge how useful it would be in real life. I asked them what they would rather read on, so hopefully by the end of using the site they would have some sort of understanding of that, and then what they felt they learned the most about. The most common answer for this was recommendations for my age group and benefits of reading from e-reader or print books. So that was pretty interesting to me. So like I said, just for this final testing, the goal and purpose, the most important thing, is it being met? And I did find that it was. Everything design-wise was okay. There were no comments about that. The majority of the users answered that they walked away learning something new, or they knew somebody with a practical purpose for the site. I really didn't get any strongly disagrees on my answers this time, and so I kind of felt like that was just a testament to the iterative design process, how you start in the beginning and you have something very basic and just kind of using the input of the users that have tested your project to really tailor it to them, to really make it the best that it can be. And so I think that that is what has made my project successful, and especially with this last round of user testing having such positive results, I think is basically why that happened. So that's just an overview of how my project has evolved, how we started with a very basic skeleton outline and kind of made it something that is interactive and useful, and something that testers actually feel like is practical and easy to use. Thank you so much for listening. Let me know if you have any questions or comments.